We're joined now by Jason Howard, one of our faves. You know, you have several different books up, but your latest one is A Few Honest Words, The Kentucky Roots of Popular Music. And this is one of those books that, as I read it, I thought, gosh, I bet he had fun putting this together. Talk a little bit about how you came to even want to write about that.
Well, this book has a long history, really rooted in my childhood. I'm an only child, and so I spent a lot of afternoons in front of my dad's old RCA turntable and listening to records by people like Johnny Cash and Otis Redding and Loretta Lynn and the Beatles and Barbra Streisand. So a very sort of ecumenical collection there. And as I grew older, roots music, I just tapped back into that childhood experience, and Kentucky music is so important.
Well, and when we talk about roots, a lot of people just throw that term out there and say, well, it's roots music. But what are we really talking about when we say roots?
We're talking about a really organic sound, mostly acoustic-based maybe, but really rooted in the folk and the people and in a storytelling tradition. That's how I think of roots music.
I love that. We've had graphic artists on outside the book who tell their stories through visuals, and musicians in so many ways use sound and music and voice to tell that story. You're a musician yourself. I've heard you perform.
Yeah, I am a little bit. Dabble here and there. I've played piano since I was 6 years old, play auto harp. Yeah.
Quite well. And so did that help when putting this together to have that musical connection?
I think it did because, I'm someone who has an understanding of music and of that process and that creative process. And it's similar to the writing process, but there's also, it's a different genre. Mm-hmm. So I think I was able to really tap into that and relate in an extra way to the people I interviewed.
And an appreciation, a real appreciation for
deep
it.
appreciation.
Now, you interviewed a lot of people. For example, the foreword is written by Rodney Crowell. Mm-hmm. And so how did you decide who you would talk to and interview for the book?
Well, when I first had the idea for the book, the first thing I did was I opened my laptop and a Word document and just started typing names of Kentucky musicians. And I quit after about 4 pages.
Wow.
And that ended up being a good problem to have because when I was narrowing it down, I wanted a diversity of genres, a diversity of genders and geographic locations, but their music just really had to speak to me. So I was fortunate enough to include people like Dwight Yoakam and Naomi Judd and Nappy Roots. So hip-hop, country right there, Dale Ann Bradley, bluegrass, Jim James, rock, Kevin Harris, jazz.
So really, as you're saying those names and you're thinking, yes, all those people have some type of connection to Kentucky, and that's the beautiful thing. And obviously it's a quite popular book, so you struck, no pun intended, but you struck a chord with readers who want to know more. Kentucky also has a very rich gospel tradition.
Mm-hmm. It does, and that was something that was important for me to include. There's a gospel singer in there. I really just wanted to push back against the notion that Kentucky music is solely bluegrass or solely country. I mean, those traditions are so important to all of us, but we've always had a strong legacy of other forms like jazz, blues, gospel, rock, and even hip-hop now.
What do you hoping readers take away when they read A Few Honest Words?
I hope they realize just how important Kentucky and our culture and geography, storytelling traditions have been to these artists, and how these artists have taken those sounds and words out into the wider world.
You talk about geography, you just mentioned, and your previous book that you collaborated on was about mountaintop removal, which to people in certain parts of the state, a certain geography in this state, means everything. Mm-hmm. Doing a book like that had to take a lot, had to take not only a lot, but I guess I'm getting at emotionally as well. Mm-hmm. Talk to that.
It did. Coming from eastern Kentucky, and valuing that topography, is just so important. I think of that wonderful psalm, "I will lift mine eyes unto the hills from whence cometh my help." That view for people in Eastern Kentucky is so important. And so land and place are very emotional to people there. It connects not only to environment, but to family, to stories, to water, to these really essential things that I think define us as Kentuckians.
Generations. And for those who may not know what mountaintop removal is, help us understand.
Well, mountaintop removal is a radical form of strip mining. And it involves scraping away the entire top of a mountain, so the trees, the topsoil, all of that valuable material, and just discarding that as waste and dumping it over the side of the mountain. It fills creek beds and streams, and it's really to get at a seam of coal that's pretty thin. I mean, sometimes as small as 18, 20 inches. So it's a very wasteful form of mining, but also a very cheap form because it doesn't require a lot of workers.
And that battle continues
Yes.
in those parts. But so very different books in that regard, I guess is what I was getting at. So what's next for you?
What's next for me? I am in the middle of a book on Bobby Kennedy's visit to Eastern Kentucky in 1968, which I think is a very pivotal moment for Kentucky and Appalachia, but also for the nation. It was 3 weeks before he announced his candidacy for president. And he was, I believe, the first national politician to sort of connect the dots of the issues that Eastern Kentucky was having.
We'll look forward to that. Jason Howard, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Barbara.